he gave the measured answer that he gave and just didn't say, I'm going to agree to the election, because he's not going to have it stolen from him.
That's a very good Donald Trump impression.
Could the Clintons, are the Clintons capable of stealing an election? Yeah, if they're capable of paying somebody to foment a violent rally.
I think what was lost there is that Rudy Giuliani does an impeccable Donald Trump impression. It was unbelievable. I think I do a pretty good one myself. Anyway, welcome back to Las Vegas, everybody. This back and forth on voters and what they can or cannot do and whether their votes are being tabulated and counted. Well, Senator Ted Cruz is taking another angle on this, looking into whether that is deliberately suppressed and whether there's voter fraud going on. Our Trace Gallagher has been following that story. Trace, what do you got?
Hey, Neil, Democratic consultant Robert Kramer was among those caught on tape by conservative action group Project Veritas, bragging about voter fraud and admitted paying mentally ill people and others to disrupt Trump rallies, or to, quote, bird dog, as they call it, meaning you get to the Trump rally early, get in the front row, and try to incite Trump supporters. Kramer was among those said to be responsible for starting violence at Trump's Chicago rally back in March that resulted in the campaign event being canceled. And Kramer said on tape the tactics were no secret to the Clinton campaign. Well, it turns out over the past 7.5 years, Robert Kramer has been to the White House on average about once a week. That's 342 times, including 47 personal visits with the president himself. Texas Senator Ted Cruz thought that number was big enough to warrant a bit of attention, tweeting, quote, voter fraud operative, 45 meetings with Obama. This merits a serious criminal investigation, not a James Comey friends and family cover-up, referring, of course, to the FBI director. After the Project Veritas video went public, Robert Kramer, who was also married to Illinois Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, resigned from working on the Democratic presidential campaign. In 2005, we should note, Kramer also spent time in prison for tax and banking violations. Neil.
All right, thank you, Trace, very, very much. I do want to switch to Florida right now, Miami Gardens, where the president is leading an event in support of Hillary Clinton. Earlier on today, he was talking up the Affordable Care Act. We're going to get to that later in the show, but, compared the problems it's having with issues you have to address when you got a starter home, you have to tune in to understand that comparison, but it's a beaut. All right, but in the meantime, I do want to go to Judge Anna Napolitano here on this issue. The voter fraud thing has now erupted as a legitimate campaign issue, and whether the controversy isn't so much what Donald Trump said, but what various operatives might be doing. What do you think, Judge?
I think it is an issue, Neil, and I sympathize with Senator Cruz. But 2 weeks before the election, to try and predict that someone's violent behavior is going to result in voter fraud is not going to interest either the Justice Department, which is controlled by the Obama administration, or even local authorities, because voter fraud by definition has occurred to affect the outcome of an election, and the election hasn't happened yet. So can anybody investigate this fellow Kramer because of the boasts that he made on air? Probably, with respect to violence that was caused, that disrupted and actually prevented a rally in Chicago. The violence was so bad. Just showed a clip of a cop with his head bleeding all over the place.
Right.
It actually prevented Donald Trump from taking the podium. That's how bad the violence was. But can that translate into an outcome that normally it wouldn't? That is, can it change votes? No one will know until the election happens.
The other issue is whether it can intimidate voters from showing up at the polls at all, which used to be something that Democrats raised against Republicans, and that kind of activity thwarted the vote. What do you think?
This Justice Department has the worst record in the modern era for policing intimidation at voting places. You remember, Neil, we covered this together. People appearing with baseball bats in their hands in Philadelphia in 2012 when the President of the United States was running for re-election, and his own Justice Department did nothing about it. So don't look for the Justice Department to address voter intimidation now. That's going to have to be done by locals. Remember, we don't have one national election. We have 51 50 states plus District of Columbia, local state-managed elections, and those people can seek out voter intimidation and look to eradicate it independent of the Justice Department.
You know, brilliant doesn't cover it, Judge. Thank you, my friend.
You look great in
And
that sun,
Napolitano.
Neil.
Yeah, I'm really dressed for the occasion, too. But that's when I'm on air. But I digress. All right, thank you, Judge, very much. We have a lot more coming from this beautiful city. And a lot of you have already been emailing me, Neil, are you really going to swim in that pool behind you? Well, you'll have to tune in to find out, won't you? All right, we have Mark Cuban coming up here and his read on things. Now, he's a big Hillary Clinton supporter. But did we find arguments there that aren't quite adding up? We report, you decide.